worked for Phonex. We did wireless phone jacks. I was the operations manager. And so we had manufacturing facilities in Asia in multiple locations, and then going down to check one of those manufacturing locations out, and it was in Indonesia. So there was me and a person that worked for me was flying over. I had looked at my passport. It had 4 months left on it. When we arrived at the airport in Salt Lake City, they informed me that you can't get into Indonesia unless you have more than 6 months left on your passport. Didn't know what to do. They said that they could fly me to Singapore because I could get into Singapore, but I couldn't get into Indonesia. So we made a spot decision and we both got on the plane. So I arrived in Singapore and he got on the next plane and flew on to Jakarta. They told me that I could go to the U.S. Embassy and update my passport. So I got to the embassy, and so while I'm waiting, I'm sitting down and watching the news. And the news reports are that there are riots in Jakarta. We knew nothing about these riots. So what do? Do you get on a plane and fly to Jakarta, or do you not? The guy that reported to me had already flown there, and he's already there. So I can abandon him, or I can try and catch up with him. But I couldn't abandon him. You don't abandon a person. So my goal was to get the passport, get on a plane, and fly to Jakarta. I was just headed out with the crowd and was going to grab a taxi and head to the hotel. As I'm walking out with 1,000 people, out of the corner of my eye, I see a guy with a little tiny sign, about that big, that said, Tony Searle. Well, it turns out that the hotel we were supposed to go to was in downtown Jakarta, right in the middle of the riot. He said, we've changed hotels to get you guys out of danger. So it's a miracle I saw him, because if I hadn't, I went and got a taxi and headed into the middle of the riots, which would have been extremely bad and dangerous and maybe fatal. And I can tell people are nervous. You can feel it. You can see it. I'd probably been up 24 hours or more. They got me checked in. I went down and checked into my room and went to bed. I had fallen asleep, and then my phone rang in my room. It's my boss, and he says, are you okay? I said yes. And he said, well, we'll see what we need to do in the morning.
When did you call Mom? Did you ever call Mom?
Yeah, I think I called her that night when I got the phone call. And I don't think she knew anything was bad, because they called her, says, you know where he's at? You know if he's okay? And then she wasn't nervous till that point.
I was surprised. At first I couldn't figure it out, because he goes, have you heard from Tony? And I was like, no, because he's in Indonesia. He can't call me. He goes, well, you hear from him. Will you let me know right away? And all of a sudden my mind starts thinking, what's wrong here? Something's wrong. It was in the evening, and so I turn on the TV and I go to the news, and of course the riots start coming on, and all of a sudden it kind of hits me, and I figured out they don't know where he is. And I don't know where he is, and I have no clue how to get a hold of him. I have my 4 kids at home, and we actually had a neighbor living with us at the same time. And so he was 16, and at the time when I turned on the news, it was later at night. I got the kids to bed, and I was watching these riots, and my mind's thinking, I don't know where Tony is. I don't know where he is. And so I was just crying, and the neighbor kid who's staying with us walks in, and he's like, what's wrong? And so I tell him, but I says, don't tell the other kids. It was scary. It was really scary.
And got up the next morning and walked out into the halls. There's people everywhere out in the halls, sleeping on the floors, sleeping in the chairs, the couches, in the lobby. Well, they had left the city. Their goal was to get out of the city and out of the riots into somewhere where it was safer. And were just sleeping anywhere they could get. And there was no rooms in the hotel. And if you went out to the back side of the hotel, and it was kind of a surreal experience, you could see down into Jakarta points of black smoke rising out there of things where they were burning, fires burning, and you can see the black smoke. The people that were trying to visit their factory and see about their factory production of our product, they finally said, look, we think we can come and get you and take you to the factory. So we hop in a car. It's their car. They're driving. We're in the back. You're flying down these side roads and back roads. And we got to a point where the traffic started backing up. And our car immediately screeched to a halt and flipped a U as fast as they could. Almost killed people. flipped that car around and headed back for the hotel. What we found out later is that these traffic jams were actually looters. And they would stop traffic and they would go from car to car, pull people out of the cars, beat them up and steal their stuff. And they said, you know what, it's just not going to work right now. It's best to get a flight and get out. And so we went to the airport to try and get a flight. Well, you can't get a flight. Every flight is filled out because everybody wants out. So we went back to the hotel and we're going to eat dinner. And at the dinner tables, every chair was filled. So they put us at a table with a couple. Well, come to find out, we looked at the man and his glasses are broken and his head's got a lump on it. And he's been beat up. Come to find out, he had been in one of those traffic jams. He'd been pulled out of his car and he'd been robbed. He'd got away, but he'd been robbed and beat up. While we were at the table, he looked at us and he said, "Why are you guys here? Don't you know that they're killing Americans?" And we looked at each other and went, "Well, we're trying to get out." So what we did is we had 2 rooms because I had a room and the other gentleman I was with had a room. We said, look, we'll just combine our rooms. You go take our room. We found out that night that they opened the door and they let all kinds of people in the room just to give them space to sleep because, like I told you, everywhere was people just sleeping anywhere they could sleep. Our boss had told us the minute you're on a plane, you call us. We don't care how much it costs. That afternoon, we caught the airplane and popped that telephone and called and says, "We're on the plane flight out." It was a rough go, but we made it out of the ride.